Alright, so here we are on the 4th episode of the build series of the SpeedyBee Bee35, and in this one I'm going to be going through and configuring everything in Betaflight, binding up the ExpressLRS controller and everything, and yeah, just going through and setting up the things inside Betaflight the way that I like to. So if you've stumbled across this video and you're not sure what it's all about, it's a build series of the SpeedyBee Bee35, and I'll put a card up here in the top corner just to show you the first episode of this series, and if you want to see the rest of the videos in this series, I'll put a link in for the playlist down in the description as well. So that's basically what I'll be going through in this video. I won't be doing any building because it's already done, and just configuring everything. So I'm NamFam, let's get into it. Alright, so first up, the first thing we're going to be needing to do is plugging in the USB-C at the back of the quad here, and on the other side into Betaflight. So you'll see that it will connect like that. And you'll first notice that the version of Betaflight that's installed on this flight controller is 4.4.2, and the target for this one is SpeedyBee F405 Mini. So it's just something good to know. I always kind of take a note of that if I need to flash it, but at the moment I think this is one of the latest versions of the firmware, so I'm not going to mess around with that. I am using the configurator, Betaflight configurator 10.9, and I think that is the latest version as well. Soon to come I think is going to be Betaflight 4.5, but I'm not in a rush to jump into that one yet, as it's currently in release candidate I think. So we'll just carry on with this right now, and I'm not sure why it's on the motor tab, but I'll just go back to setup, and it's all upside down as you can see. I think the flight controller, because we mounted it in the frame upside down, and because it just came from factory, they don't know what we're putting it into, and it's upside down, but we'll set all that up, fix it up in a second. The first thing that I like to do when I do get a flight controller is plugging it in and then downloading and getting the backup as well. So we'll go into the CLI, and to do that we'll just type in diff all. It will give you all the settings that are part of this flight controller at the moment that came from factory, and it's just good to have, I think, always keeping something from the defaults from factory if you want to set everything back to the way it was when they sent it out to you. So I'm just going to save to file here, and I'll find a location, so I'll just put it in here. I've already created a folder, and I'll just put the date stamp, leaving it as is. I might even put at the beginning of it original from factory, just so that I know that it is going to be coming, well, I know that is the right version. Okay, so I've backed up the config for the stock, I guess, firmware that came with from the factory, and now I can start to configure the things that I like in here, and if I do have any issues I can come back here, load it from the file again, and then reapply it and save it again. So I'll go up to here into setup. I don't know why Betaflight sometimes does that when we jump from the CLI out to setup, it just kind of resets and reconnects, but that's how it did it. So right now I just want to calibrate the accelerometer. It's currently on the bench, flat and level, so I'll click on calibrate accelerometer. Alright, so now that's done, I can start going through the other tabs. On the ports tab, one of the things that I noticed is UART 4 is set to MSP over here, and I believe the reason for that one is the flight controller actually has Bluetooth connectivity on it, so that UART 4 allows for the SpeedyBee app to access the flight controller via Bluetooth, so you can actually configure out in the field using your mobile phone and the SpeedyBee app, and you'll need to leave the UART 4 on for that. So if you turn it off, it will actually disable the Bluetooth connectivity, so just make a note, UART 4, that's reserved, so we'll leave that on. Over here, UART 2 is currently set to serial RX, and that's because by default they wanted to set it up with the UART 2. So I think one of the previous episodes when I started installing the ExpressLRS and it wasn't in the right, I guess it wasn't the wires weren't long enough and I couldn't actually set it into the frame, and I had to switch from UART 2 to UART 6 I believe, so I'll double check that later, but I think it is UART 6. So what I'll have to do here is disable UART 2 and enable UART 6. But for your one, if you've wired it up to the UART 2 the way that the flight controller has shown it in its diagrams, wiring diagrams, then leave it on UART 2 or any other UART that you decided to solder to. But for mine, I left it on UART 6, and I'll turn on serial RX here. Since I wired up the O3 Air Unit to UART1, I'm going to have to turn on over here the peripherals onto MSP plus DisplayPort. So this will allow for the OSD to show up in the O3 Air Unit. So that's how we're going to have to set it up. So UART1 turning on the BTX MSP plus DisplayPort. So that's now done, and I'll have to save and reboot. Okay, so all of that saved successfully, and one thing to note within the ports tab is if you've saved something incorrectly, like if you've set multiple things on the one UART, sometimes that combination will not work and it will reset all of the configurations in this page when you hit save and reboot. So just be aware of that. If it goes funny after you do a save and reboot, that's likely what happened, and then you'll have to go through and set everything up again, and hopefully you can get it to the right combinations that are correct. And I think I've got it all set up here nicely. Over in the configuration tab, I'll just go down the settings here. Accelerometer, barometer, magnetometer, we'll just leave it all as it is. Craft name, I'll put in NXP B35. Pilot name, NXP 200. I'm not sure what the camera angle really does, so I'm just gonna leave it there. Arming, maximum arm angle, I'm gonna turn this to 180 degrees, and this allows me to arm the quad even when it's upside down or any other angle. So if you want to do turtle mode, you'll need to turn it to 180, and turtle mode, if you're not sure what that is if the craft is upside down, it allows you to activate turtle mode, which reverses the thrust of the propellers, pushing it backwards, and then you can flip the quad back to its right side up, so that you can then fly back to yourself and recover a crash that's far away from you, or if you're stuck in a tree or on top of a building, something like that. That kind of saves you from losing your quad. Down here, I'll leave, I think all of these by default, I'll leave the OSD on, soft serial, and also air mode. I like having air mode on. I will be playing around with a bit of air mode on a switch, and I might make a video on that because I think that's kind of interesting. Over on the right here, I think I might have to change some of the settings of the yaw degrees and also roll degrees as well, because the flight controller is now upside down. I don't know if it's actually the right orientation. I'm pretty sure it's not. Alright, so here I'm going to have to jump over to the setup tab, but since I've made a few changes, I'll hit the save and reboot first. Going over to the setup page, and currently it's level, so that's why it's showing level there. But if I tilt the head up, you see how it actually goes down. So if I point the quad nose down, the actual image over here in Betaflight, the nose goes up, so it pitches up as I actually physically pitch it down. So I'm gonna have to change some of that, and I think the roll seems to be correct. If I roll to the left, it's right. If I roll to the right, it's right. I should say correct. So I'll have to fix up the pitch, and I'll go over there now and play around with it. Okay, now that I've determined that the pitch is actually the one that needs to be changed, I'll just play around with it, see how we go, and then I'll let you know what I've actually set up. Alright, so I was able to get the right orientation or the settings for the yaw and the pitch and the roll, just so that it actually works. So you can see on the image there, I can roll to the left and it rolls left on the image, rolling right, pitch forward, pitch back, and yaw works quite nicely as well. So I think that's all set up nicely, and I'll just jump over so you can see, because if you've installed the flight controller in the same way that I did, these are the settings that you'll need to put in. So on the pitch degrees, I put 180, and the yaw degrees, I put 180. So that's how it's set up correctly, and as you saw there, it works. I'll leave all these settings here. I think by default, I think the beacon tone I'll put on RX loss, and I'll leave the RX set as well. I'll turn it on. I might want the beeper on when I flick a switch, so I'll put that on. Over here on the beeper configuration, I usually kind of leave it all on. I'll just skim through this. Yep, for now I'm just going to leave it, keep it simple. I'll save and reboot now. Okay, on the power and battery tab, I'm going to leave everything, I think, as is. Let's see how we go. Hopefully we can get the voltmeter or the voltage and the current sense coming through, I can't recall if I need to set it up or change anything there, but we'll figure that out later. Fail safe, I like to leave it as default. Basically, if we lose connection, I like it to drop. I don't want it to kind of do anything fancy at the moment. I know that we do have the return to home. I don't have a GPS on here at the moment, so I'm not going to set all that up. I just wanted to drop traditionally, just the easy way, and I just make sure that I fly safely, that if I do need to drop, I'm dropping somewhere that is safe and not going to hurt anyone. I don't really fly over people or property that could be damaged, so we'll leave it as is. Alright, so over in the presets, one thing I haven't done before, and I wanted to make a quick video about it, but I may as well do it here just to show you. So I want to use the O3 preset for the OSD DisplayPort. So here, basically on the presets, I'm going to search for O3, and I've seen this done before. I think Joshua Bardwell's done this in his live stream. So down the bottom here, OSD for FPV, WTF, DJI O3, Avatar HD, and I believe you can just use this and it will set up all the details in the basically what the CLI does and everything to be able to set it up correctly. So I can go down here, map to DisplayPort, set HD OSD as well, so that's good. And the UART that I used for the O3 Air Unit was UART 1, so use DisplayPort and MSP VTX on UART 1, checking that. And then we can go down here and hit pick, save and reboot, and hopefully that's all configured up correctly. We'll find out later when we bind up the goggles to the O3 Air Unit and check out the OSD and see if that actually took effect. So we'll move on and then we can sort it out later. Over on PID tuning, here we're going to set up some PIDs. I might actually take some of the CLI dump that came from Oscar Liang. So over here on Oscar Liang's website, I'm going to put the link in the description down below, but down the bottom of the page, right near the bottom, there's a how to set up page or section that does have their CLI diff from SpeedyBee. So I'm going to go in there and have a look at it. I've already opened it up here. You can see that here there is the code for the CLI dump, and I'm going to use out of this, I'm going to go through and find out the PID settings and then apply that over on the quad. Okay, so here we have the profile 0. I'm just going to copy profile 0 all the way down to the bottom and copy that. Profile 1, 2 and 3 are not actually set with anything, and the profiles are default, so I'm not going to need them. I'm just going to copy these and go over to Betaflight, go into the CLI, paste that in. I think it pasted, yep. Hit enter. We will apply all those and then I'll save so that it can save and reboot. Alright, so I think that's what they have set from the factory for the B35 as a PID. I'm not really sure what the warning about here is about, so hopefully it's okay. We'll do some test flights and hopefully it's alright and we can start to tune and adjust these ourselves. And I'm just gonna see if I can turn this on. Yep, RPY or RP. I think we'll leave it as that for now. Alright, so now that we've got all that set, I'm just gonna leave it as RP there and hit save. Alright, so here are my rates. I like to run these numbers here. I think it's a little bit high for some, and some people might say I should tune it down, but I like flying with this, so I'm just going to punch them in. Alright, once I've got that in, I can hit save and reboot. Over on the receiver tab, we're going to have to change this from serial via UART. Actually not change that one, we'll leave it as serial UART because it is on that one, and then change this one to crossfire CRSF. I'll turn telemetry on and we'll save and reboot. So I'll bind up the ExpressLRS receiver soon and move on, and I'll do the binding later. We'll leave the modes tab for now because I haven't bound the controller yet, so I'm just gonna move on. Adjustments, I'll leave that. Servos, I'll leave that. On the motors tab, this one's quite important. So we have here the D-Shot 300, and I'm just gonna hook up a battery to the quad and then test out the motors here, making sure that they are spinning in the right orientation. Since this is a whoop, I believe having the props going in, basically props in flowing this way, will I think eliminate some of the yaw washout, but I'm gonna just leave it as that, reorder the motors so that it is correct, and the motor direction as well in this order. So down here, before we even do that, I'm going to turn on bidirectional D-shot and hit agree. And at this point, I think I've turned on bidirectional D-shot, but I want to check on ESC configurator just to make sure that it does have BlueJ installed on them instead of BLHeli-S firmware. So I'll just go over there and check it now. Alright, so over here on ESC configurator, with it all plugged in like this, if we, I think we can connect at the moment. I'm going to plug in a battery and get it to boot up. Alright, so we've got that booted up now, which the motors or the ESC can now communicate. So we'll go and connect. Actually, because Betaflight is running at the moment, it's connected. I'll have to disconnect from there. And at the same time, I'm going to turn off auto connect just to make sure that if it does reboot, it doesn't reconnect here. So over here, I'm going to refresh the page and hit connect. And there we go, we've connected. Alright, so we can now go and read the settings of the ESC firmware. And it's going through each one now. And here we are, we can see that it does have BLHeli-S installed on here and not BlueJ, so we wouldn't have been able to use bidirectional D-shot, and we need BlueJ installed. So here, since we've all set up here, we can actually go and do that now. But before I do, I'm going to get an actual fan just to blow on the O3 Air Unit, because right now, since we have the battery plugged in, it's going to be heating up on the table. Okay, I've got this handy fan here. I'm just going to turn it on full blast and put it underneath where the O3 Air Unit is. Hopefully, and apologies for the sound if it's coming through, but I'm going to need that there just to keep it all cool. So for now, while I'm just over here on on ESC configurator, I'm going to flash the firmware. So I'm not going to do it one by one, but I'm going to go down here, flash all ESCs, and I'm going to change the firmware from BLHeli-S to BlueJ. Leave the ESC as the JH40 because that was auto detected. The version I'm going to keep selected there by default is 0.19.2. On the PWM frequency, I'm going to leave it at 24 at the moment. I'm not sure what the desired one that for this kind of quad is yet, so I'm just going to leave it at 24, and then we can try and work our way up on the PWM frequency later when we start tuning it. So here we go, we're just going to flash it and hit flash. Okay, so the BlueJ firmware is now flashed to all of the ESCs, and I'm going to leave all of these details basically default for now, and I can start tuning them later when I start doing some test flights. From here we'll disconnect so we can go over to, well, there you go, that's the tune of the default BlueJ booting up. Right now I'm just going to jump back to Betaflight and turn on auto connect again and reconnect. Alright, so here we've got the battery still plugged in, and you can see the battery sense is here, so it's a 6S 22.98 volts, and I'm just going to do a bit of testing. Right now I'll be able to turn on bidirectional D-shot. I think I turned it on before but I didn't hit save, but I wanted to check the firmware of the ESC, so we can turn on bidirectional D-shot. This will change enable the RPM filtering, and we'll hit agree. And now we can go over, actually I do want to check the motor poles, so I'm just going to count really quickly the magnets on the motors, each of the motors, and it should match to 14, and it kind of does. I think the smaller motors has 12 and these size motors have 14, but I'll just double check that now. Yep, they do have 14 magnets in there. So now we can go over and hopefully we can start testing out the motors. Now that I've saved some of them, I think I'll have to save and reboot before I can actually test out the motors. So I'll go save and reboot. Alright, so now that's done, I can then hit the I understand the risks. Make sure that the props are off. We don't want to have anything flying around in the house, especially with something like this of this size. It can really cause some damage or injury. So here we are, we can go through each of the motors and then test out that it actually spins up. So I can I can turn that one up. So you can see here, this motor here is spinning. So that's motor 3, but I'm on here turning or pushing up the motor 1 slider. So that's not correct, but I'm going to have to do the reordering of the motors. But for now, I'm just checking that each motor actually does spin up correctly and is not damaging anything. So here I can try and spin up motor 2, and that's coming up that one there. This is the third one, and it's spinning up this one down here. And the last one up here, yep, it's spinning that one up there. So cool, the motors are working. That's just testing that they are firing up individually. And I can go over and turn off I understand the risks, because I'm going to go up here and reorder the motors. So here we can hit on reorder motors, and I understand the risks again, and hit start. So then we can tell which one's actually spinning. We can hit this one, so this one's spinning here. I'll just tap on that. Up here I can hit that one. Down at the bottom right here, and then the top one there, I can hit it. And I hit save. So hopefully that's done the right motor ordering, and we can then test that number 1, 2, 3, and 4 are in that order. So we can go back down here, turn on I understand the risks, turn on motor 1, and there you go, motor 1 spinning. Cool. I've noticed that with this Betaflight configurator, sometimes you turn it down to 0 and it doesn't turn the motor off. So I think other people have reported the same thing, and it can be a bit annoying and sometimes dangerous if you do have a smaller quad with props in there and it doesn't turn off. But for now, luckily we don't have the props on. Well, we'll continue to motor 2, hopefully. Yep, so that one turns on. Number 3 down here, great. And then number 4 over here. So once we've done that, we can now set up the motor direction, making sure that they spin the right way and clockwise or anti-clockwise. So I'll turn off this here and go back up here to motor direction. I understand the risks. I don't have props on, and I can go through. I'll try the wizard, and I'll click on start spin the motors, and this will spin up all the motors, and I'll have to feel them one by one to see which one I have to turn the other way around. So this one's actually spinning. I can kind of feel that it's spinning in a clockwise direction, which on here the screen clockwise for number 1 is correct. Number 2 is spinning anti-clockwise or counterclockwise, so that's correct. Number 3 here is spinning counterclockwise or anti-clockwise, you can see that there. And then the last one, number 4, is spinning the right direction, so I don't have to actually change anything. I can stop the motors and click close. So that was great. Basically by default that actually works quite well. So now we have the motors all set up correctly in the right orientation and everything in the right order, and also the motor direction. So here on the OSD screen, I'm just going to go through and put on the options that I want to see on my OSD, and you can follow along and put the same ones as well, or you can set it up the way that you like it. Alright, so I like to have the battery average cell voltage. Since we're using ExpressLRS, I like to have link quality and also RSS dBm value. I like to also see the throttle position as well. Timer 1, which will be the on timer, and also timer 2 as the flight time. To have the flight time set up properly, over here you need to have the timers. So the first one, source 1, will be the on timer, and also the total arm time as well, which is good, it's already set like that. And I'll leave over here the standard warnings. I just kind of like to leave them as it is. A few of the post-flight statistics, I'll just set them up here. I like to see the battery current draw, just to see how much it's maxed out on the current draw for each of the motors. I'll put on the battery voltage end. Also like to see the battery voltage minimum as well, because that will be how much the battery is sagging. I don't need to see the black box number for now, or the black box usage. And I'll turn off the RSSI minimum and speed maximum. Don't need to see them, but I'd like to turn on the link quality minimum and also RSSI dBm minimum as well, just so I know how bad the link quality or the ExpressLRS receiver quality was where I was flying. Alright, so once we've set all of that up, we can go down here and hit save. Okay, so that's not all yet, because after checking all those on, they've all just put it all into the center here, so I'm going to have to drag each one of these out. So I'll place it on the screen one by one, and I won't bore you with that, I'll just set them up now. So I don't know if you just saw that, I was trying to set it up and it was actually not in HD, and I wasn't really sure what was going on there. So I think there's a bit of a bug in Betaflight configurator in using the presets to set up the OSD in HD. So in the previous step where I went through the presets and set up the O3 OSD settings, I think it didn't take effect properly to have this HD setting, even though the checkbox here was set on HD. I just went and flicked it over to NTSC and back to HD to see what would happen, and you can see it here now. It's in the HD mode with much more resolution, or at least a wider screen to be able to put these elements onto a much more finer grid. So I'll move these around now in the right positions and then I'll save. Alright, so I've got them in the right place now, and all I'll need to do is save. Okay, so the OSC is done, and we'll go through the rest of these, but I think there's nothing left to do. Video transmitter is usually set for the analog transmitter. We're not using one of them, we're using an O3 in this one. Sensors, I'm going to leave it as is. This is just to check out the sensors. Tethering log, black box, I'm not worried about at the moment, and the bottom is just the CLI. So there we have it. Those are the things that I would go through quickly in setting up this quad, and I think the next step is basically to go through and set up the receiver, and we'll go through that now. So we're going to have to bind up the ExpressLRS receiver, and to do that I'm going to have to turn on my controller. So I won't have that on camera, but basically it's just turning it on, and I do already have it set up on ExpressLRS 3, and since the ExpressLRS receiver I've got here is already on version 3 as well, I'll just need to wait until it goes into Wi-Fi mode and connect to it using a Wi-Fi, like a Wi-Fi hotspot essentially, and then going into the settings there. Alright, so I've been able to join onto the ExpressLRS Wi-Fi that it's been broadcasting, and I can go in here and enter in the binding phrase. So I can go and type it in here, what I've already got on my controller, and hopefully that will then allow for the receiver to be binded and be able to connect, so I can then configure it or check it out within Betaflight. Once you've got the binding phrase in there, you hit save and reboot. Upload succeeded, and reboot. Okay, so once we've done that in ExpressLRS, the Wi-Fi for the receiver, we can go over to Betaflight, connect up the quad again. So I've got it here, and we can go into the receiver tab to see we've actually got connection. And let's move some of the controls. And there we go, we do have it all connected, and also I can see the telemetry, the dBms on the controller as well. But you can see it here, it's controlling it quite well, and it is doing all the right things in terms of the roll left, roll right, pitch forward, pitch back, and also your left and your right as well. So there we go, we have binded it up and it's all set up and ready to go. At the moment the throttle is down below 1000, which is okay, and these are somewhere around the 1500, which is alright as well. I'll need to go into the modes, and I'll set up the modes now. So on the arm, I'll need to set it up. I think I like on this here on aux1, and it's a switch. Ignore the sounds on my controller. I'll try and move it out of the way so it's not too loud. But on aux1 there, I'll flick it onto that there. I can set it up like that, and then that will be on aux1. I do like to have the pre-arm as well. I always like to have it on my controllers. So pre-arm here, I'll add a range, and I'll flick the switch for my pre-arm. Okay, so it's there on aux4, and I'll move it up here. And I think flip over crash, so that would be adding range, and this is for the total mode, so I'll flick that there, aux3. I also like to have the beeper on the aux3 as well on the same switch, so if I'm flipped over or if I need the beeper to run, I can use the same switch as well. So I'll look for that now. Where's the beeper? Beeper here, so add range on the same switch here. So when I do go into beeper mode and then arm the quad, because it's already on the same switch, flip over after crash, it will then automatically go into total mode and the beeping will stop, which will allow me to then control the motors. So at that point, if I'm trying to flip over, I kind of know what I need to do with it to try and recover the quad. And also, I think the last one is to be able to set up angle mode. I don't use angle mode, but as a habit, I kind of just have it on angle mode as the switch here on the range. So I like to have it on this switch when I first arm the quad. Not even, I can arm it while it's not in. So this will be the acro mode and it won't be in angle mode. But if I do need it in angle mode, if I need it to kind of just hover there while I adjust something like my goggles, then I can put it down to angle mode and then fly like that for a moment before I go back into acro mode. Once that's all done, I can hit save and it'll save all of those settings. And I like to go and hide the unused modes and then just verify that I do have the ones that I need here. Got the arm on switch aux1. I've got the angle mode set up, the beeper, flip over after crash, and also the pre-arm for safety. Alright, so that's pretty much everything that we're going to configure in here. So we've got the ESC all flash with the latest firmware. We've got the mode set up here. We've got the motors tested out as well. And I think we're ready for a test flight, but unfortunately I won't be able to do it now. I've just recently moved house, so everything is an absolute mess and everything in boxes. So I need to unbox and get everything sorted. Then I'll be able to start doing a test flight. I know that it's been a bit late, so apologies for that. But I wanted to get it right, so I'm going to have to leave it here. This is just the configuration of Betaflight with all the settings, and in the next video we'll do a test flight and see how it goes. So that's all for this video. Thanks for sticking by and watching. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.